This is why we really love the Marc Pro. We get to put on the electrodes, and in a passive way, we can create an active systemic internal compression, which is really what we're after. External compression creates a solution, but it also creates a problem at the same time.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Excellence in Motion. Today, Dr. Chad is joining us again to discuss some different recovery options when it comes to athletics and sport. The common recovery go-to for a lot of people is ice, and we're here to tell you that ice is not our jam.
What?
We actually want to use something a little bit different, and I've actually talked about it already in a previous video. If you want to click on this banner up here, it'll show you a video talking about the Marc Pro versus the Compex for electronic stimulation for muscles. That's a really good one if you want to get some overview for that device. But today we're going to talk about how the Marc Pro is a better recovery option than ice for your injuries.
Yep!
So stick around, listen to Dr. Chad talk about all that stuff, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Hey, what's up? Dr. Chad with NRG Physio. Talking a little bit today about some common myths in the marketplace around what to do with a brand new injury. Most of you are probably familiar with the R.I.C.E method, rest, ice, compression, elevation. Did you know Dr. Gabe Merkin, who coined that method, has actually withdrawn that because we've kind of expanded our thinking on what to do with an injury. And what originally happened was the thought was, hey, we got to slow blood flow down, we need to slow fluid to the area, and we need to create some pain relief. And really now we're understanding, hey, the body is doing that for a reason. And so as a follow-up to our video on the Marc Pro, what we're talking about today is why we're now choosing not to ice injuries and moving more towards an active recovery. And what that looks like is instead of resting, icing, compressing, elevated, a very passive approach to injury management. Now we're taking a more active style of management to an injury, which compression can still fit in. There's some ideas around that. Elevation can certainly fit in. There's some different ideas around that, but really this idea of rest is what we're after.
Today's episode is brought to you by ULTRAHUMAN. ULTRAHUMAN is a health and wellness app that is designed to help you with meditation, sleep, and workouts. All of the content produced on ULTRAHUMAN is brought to you by the best of the best in all of their respective fields. ULTRAHUMAN has been really helpful for me over the past couple of months with their guided meditations that help me fall asleep faster and stay a lot more relaxed. If you want to do workouts on the fly and you have nothing but yourself in a room, you can use some of the workouts provided by people like Cara Saunders and many, many others. If you want to give ULTRAHUMAN a shot, use the link in the description to get yourself a discount on the yearly subscription to ULTRAHUMAN. It's one of the best all-around health and fitness apps out there on the market right now. So go ahead and hit that link in the description and enjoy the rest of today's video.
Total rest is not great for an injury, and here's why. Injuries need an appropriate amount of loading and movement to restore normal tissue quality and health. It also adds in blood flow, which is this idea of groceries in, and then these small pain-free movements that are non-disrupting to an injury is an idea that we think of garbage out. Here's the basics. For an injury, we want increased blood flow through what's called anastomoses. Broken vessels are going to shut off and regrow new systems of blood flow management to help perfuse an area, because injuries need blood flow to heal. They need oxygen, they need nutrients, so we have to have blood flow. The cascade of events that creates that blood flow is called inflammation, right? So if you remove inflammation from the human body, it doesn't heal. We've got research that shows if you remove all these inflammatory processes from the system, healing doesn't occur. And the reason for that is inflammation is what sets off the cascade of events for healing. Inflammation is the first step in the healing process. So what we don't want to do is slow that process down. The body is going to do what it's going to do. It's going to provide what it's going to provide. And whether you do something that speeds that up or slows it down, the process is going to take place. So we want to facilitate what the body is trying to do and minimize the things that will slow that process down, because what we want is quicker healing times with a better outcome at the end of that. So when we think about icing, there's some research that shows maybe we get decreases in blood flow. We get decreases in those inflammatory markers. And so the thought is, maybe best case scenario here, we're just slowing the process down. But the body is going to send the appropriate amount of inflammatory response to an area. It's going to send the appropriate amount of fluid to the area to protect that site. And overall, it's going to send everything it needs to that injured area to create the effect that the body needs to complete the healing process. So enter Marc Pro. The idea is, hey, the lymphatic system is what's going to clear this stuff out for us. So we know the lymphatic system works on two primary motors, which is large muscle activation and large vessel pulsation. So what we're looking at here is in the extremities, we've got all your muscles that when they squeeze, they compress the lymphatic vessel and push the fluid up the vessel. This is a one-way track. The only time this is a two-way track is when there's damage and backflow occurs, and that's only happens when there is some type of problem going on with the lymphatic system. Otherwise, it's a one-way track. So when a muscle squeezes, it creates pressure on that vessel, sends the fluid up. When the muscle relaxes, it creates what's called negative pressure. It draws more fluid into the lymphatic vessel, and then you pump again, the cycle continues. At the same time this muscle pump is going on, it's actually increasing blood flow to the area as well. It's that groceries in, garbage out that we're really looking for. And so now when we flip back over to these passive systems, knowing that the only way fluid moves through a limb is with muscle pump, resting doesn't feed into that equation. So we've got to find pain-free ways to keep moving, keep the muscles activated so that we can flush that fluid out and bring good, fresh blood flow in. When we think about compression, external compression does create a gradient within the limb that can push fluid up the limb. But the detriment there is when you create a gradient up, you also create a negative gradient down. So while a compressive force externally is maybe pushing some fluid up the limb, it's not actually clearing it through the lymphatic system, and it's also making it more difficult for blood flow to enter the limb because it's created a pressure gradient that's driving something up the limb. Now, we get into elevation, which can be beneficial for you because it creates a natural flow. It doesn't resist blood flow coming in, but it does help fluid flow out. It still doesn't put that stuff in the lymphatic system and clear it, but it does move it from one joint segment, one muscle, up the limb to a new area, which can help with pain relief and just being able to move a little better, decongesting a joint in an area, allowing you to move a little more freely. And so what we like to do is actually combine some active recovery with elevation. And so this is why we really love the Marc Pro. We get to put on the electrodes, and in a passive way, we can create an active systemic internal compression, which is really what we're after. External compression creates a solution, but it also creates a problem at the same time. Whereas internal compression, that muscle pump, drives the fluid up, draws more fluid in, and repeats over and over and over. And that's what the Marc Pro can do for you as an athlete. If your muscles are really congested, maybe you took an ankle sprain or a knee tweak and it's a little blown up and got some swelling there, we can consistently pump those muscles to create groceries in and garbage out in a way that facilitates what the body is already doing rather than kind of going against some of these basic physiologic principles. You get to sit, you get to rest, you get to relax, you can elevate with it, but at the same time, it's providing that active compression. And once the fluid gets to the trunk, you have large vessels of your arteries and veins in the trunk that are massive, and their kind of natural action inside the trunk help funnel the lymph fluid up to your heart, where then it enters the bloodstream, gets rid of it later. And so that's really what we want to do, and that's the conversation we're having with our athletes today, is if you take a tweak, let's manage this with active recovery. If you don't have a Marc Pro device, this is as simple as, let's just take an ankle sprain. your ankle's a little blown up. It's as simple as wiggling your toes, doing light ankle pumps in a pain-free way, doing some quad sets, some hamstring sets, just getting your leg involved and tightening your glutes up over and over and over. While it is fatiguing and you're going to be limited in how much you can do there, that is a better solution than sitting with a cold bag of ice on the joint, which is only going to create more stiffness. We know just basic fluid dynamics is hot fluid moves easier than cold fluid. So compressing and compacting in a bunch of cold fluid in a joint is not a great way to get rid of it. Yes, it's going to help you with pain relief, but what's the payout on the end of that? You're receiving pain relief for 10 or 12 minutes, but at the same time, you are lengthening your recovery times and creating a more difficult, stiff joint to get moving, which is the idea. How can we get moving? How can we do it better? How can we find something that facilitates what the body's doing instead of going against what the body's trying to do? And that's why we think, hey, stop icing your injuries. Let's shoot for active recovery. Our choice is the Marc Pro. We'll see you later.